welcome back to Flying So 6 channel here. I am going to do a quick overview of the journey phase and what that essentially means. So the journey phase is essentially a combination of a RPG mini session going through the journal with your characters, and it will lead to branching paths that can lead to different quests that you will actually play. So let's talk about what it is. So you will have a selection of adventure cards depending on where you are in the game that are available to choose from. We are assuming that we are just after the tutorial, so we have adventure card C or D that we can choose from. And I will show you. So we'll say we pick adventure card C here. We read the back of the card, which gives us some narrative text. But otherwise, if we say we want to go with adventure card C, we will go to that page in the rule book, which the table of contents is very helpful to begin with. So that one is called Counter Espionage, page 13. We change to page 13 in the book, starting at section 1. So look here on the journal. Counter-espionage, section 1, and you begin reading there, and you start following the text from that point. If you do not want to participate in doing the journal part at all, I suggest always choosing the fast action mode option. That allows you to essentially skip everything, and we make some choices essentially for you, and then you go right into the next part. So you will play through this RPG section. This is talked about in the rule book, of course, as to how to play. But basically, you are rolling some dice for your characters and using those ability points to see if you make these ability checks. After you get through the section in the journal, branching your way through the different sections, it will give you an option like go to the quest guide and set up quest 3 burning bridges. So if we got to that option, we would then remove the journal. It won't be needed for a little bit here, so we'll change to the third quest here, burning bridges. Okay, and then we can read this beginning section, which tells us what our primary objectives are, what happens if you lose, the extra challenges, what special rules exist, and then it'll give us like the initial setup. So then you can build this board here based on what it tells you in the initial setup. And then you'll notice it almost always does this. And then it says, then after reading the special rules, read 3.1. Which means then after we have built the board, we will then come back to the journal and we will go back to our table of contents here. We'll go to the third quest, right? Because that is the quest we're playing, Burning Bridges. And that says page 225. And usually most of the time, it just maybe gives you some type of filler text that says if you have such and such type thing, then set this up. For burning bridges, it's actually a special case where you'll also use a additional tile that's to the side of the board, and you'll set that up as well. So that will be part of the special rules and things specifically for burning bridges. But for other quests, usually it's just a text like if you have such and such fact or a slot marked from the journal, which is what will happen in the journal, then you will apply those consequences from that. And then basically you just play through the quest. Once you have either succeeded or failed, you will then go back to the journal. So in the journal, it says, so you come back to the journal and it says, read this only if you have won the quest. If you lose the quest, that's actually written on the quest guide. And then you continue reading and it'll tell you some victory conditions, some other narrative. It'll also tell you the defeat text here. And then I'll tell you what the next adventure options are. So like in this case, you would gain another adventure card, which would begin your next journey phase. And then the most important part is it says, if you lose this quest, read 001. If you won, read 002. What that means is go all the way back to the beginning of your journal. And there is this text. Essentially, this is Dragori's way of, instead of like rewriting the same things over and over and over in the game, you follow number 001 if you lost, or go to 002 if you won, and you just follow those steps to get like resources. And depending on, you know, what happened, like if you didn't use any first aid, or if you know, depending on what your chemet level was, and if you completed the extra challenge. So anyway, then that is basically the end of the journal, the quest phase. The last thing that you'll do, which is actually described in there, is you will then take the quest card that you earned, and you get this quest card here, which you will keep, and this will be used mostly for the war phase, but you'll also mark down the mastery points that you get here into your campaign. Okay, so let's talk about the components for playing the journey phase. I have 4 heroes set up here. We have Jirana, Talia, Rikaru, Neri. So Talia and Rikaru are played as comrade characters, which means they're simplified form, so that way we don't have to play as much additional skill pads. Just because it is a little bit more to remember and things to do, so it makes the game a little more challenging, just because you have a lot more interacting between the quest and what you're doing. So for at least the player, you're going to have 4 primary attacks here. At the beginning of the game, you'll have 2 hero-specific ones, and then 2 role generic ones. So at the beginning, they are level 0 here. So you always have 4. You will have your hero miniature. You have a skill pad. This is for a character being fully played. You'll have 4 skill tokens, the ones marked as level 0 for this point of the game. As you move on, you will get higher level ones, and so that will change. You'll have the HP tracker token that you will place on the board to mark the health for that character. You will have mana cubes here for that specific class, and you just put it off to the side. Then you have 2 special attacks for that character. You will have their hero card and then an NPC card. At the beginning of the game, you're just going to get the initial heroes, but I wanted to show an example of what it looks like if you have a special or a not initial character, initial NPC character. So we have Helang, the challenger here. He will provide his ability points within the journal, and then for the quest, we will gain this. So we get either a additional mana cube to start the quest or 2 empowered tokens. So we can just mark that here as having 1 additional mana cube to start. I have some reference cards. If you know it, then obviously you don't need it, but you can have it there. For me, I have a little dice tray. The special token here is used only sometimes in some quests that need to track whether you have like one condition or the other, and you'll use this, but otherwise it's really not needed very much. Okay, then we have our adventure cards, which I have mentioned already, and we will choose which adventure we want to go into and go from there. I have loot cards just so that way once we get to the end of the quest, I can draw the amount of loot that we get for winning or losing or whatever it is, depending on that. And then here are the quest cards. You only need a small stack of them just because you're not essentially going to be playing like the end game quests at the beginning of the game. So you can reduce the amount of quest cards that you need to actually place on the board. We have the campaign log where we'll track the campaign progress. We have the rule book and then the city book just beneath that there just for references, but you won't really need that in this part of the game. We have the journal, which I mentioned already, you'll use for the first part of the journey phase. Then we have the quest guide, which we'll set up, use to set up the quest. For our comrade heroes, you will have a miniature. You will have their hero card. You will have their primary attack card that is specific for that comrade. So we're at Natural Lab level 1, and we are using a healer comrade, and so she will get this. They will also have an NPC, which will help them in the journal part. I use a specific one here, but technically comrades do not get the quest power. They only get essentially the effect of whatever week it is, they will gain a mana cube. So actually this one does end up happening to match, but essentially week 1 comrades, they will get 1 mana cube. Week 2, they will start with 2 mana cubes, 3, and then there actually is a note for what happens once you get to week 6. Then we have the 2 special attacks that they will get, and they're actually the same for both comrades, but otherwise you are doing the same thing, getting the same trackers, mana cubes, just the different color depending on which character you're playing, miniatures, that kind of stuff. And then for any hero, you'll get that same kind of same cards that was mentioned here for Jorana. Same thing for Neri. Next components that I have here to the side, you can put them, however you want. Is we have a bunch of the condition markers. They're actually dual-sided. So, like, there's the distracted on one side, there is protected on the other. There's bleed on one side here, preserved on the other, and then weakened on this side, but empowered on the other. Then you have any miniatures that you're going to use. Right now I'm just using the generic ones that come in Arena the core box, just because it's a little quicker to play, but of course, when I'm kind of showing off the game and showing people more, we change to the specific ones, and you can use, of course, the snap-on bases to snap the color that you're going to use. Here is their tokens for tracking the health of those characters. We have our warlord here. And then if you need to have a bigger miniature, I have one there. It's not used all the time. Next up is we have the villain cards. I do have both stacks just because it's depending on the quest, you're kind of changing how many you're going to use. So I just have both in 2 different stacks, but they're all in order. So that way it's easier to find. I highly suggest keeping your villain cards in order. Otherwise you're going to have a really tough time playing the game trying to find the right villain card. Then we have some tokens over here. We have a lot of the tile pieces and then the boards below here. And then I have a lot of the extra terrain. Of course, you can just use tiles instead, but specifically because I have a lot of the other expansion stuff, I have the 3D miniatures for a lot of those. And then we have the tokens that will be used to track for, like, if orbs or doors or prisoners take damage or need to be marked on there, then that will be there as well. So anyway, this is a general setup of the components you need to play the journey phase in Tanares Adventures.